Hello, everyone. Art Burns here, wishing you well today. So, the last couple of days, I've talked about compassion and self compassion and how valuable these qualities are in reducing the stress in our bodies and also in maintaining a healthy relationship with those stressors that cause the stress in our bodies, right? And when we talk about self compassion, we're talking about building up an emotional resilience. We're talking about, feeling a level of fulfillment and happiness, which is from the inside, right? It's a genuine self motivated kind of fulfillment and happiness, and this is an enormous safeguard against stress in our bodies, right? Because when we feel fulfilled, remember, stress is transactional, right? Stress is the feeling of there's something on the outside of me that is overwhelming the resources that I have on the inside of me, and therefore I feel in danger. Now my body goes into the stress response, right? And so when we're practicing self-compassion, we're kind of telling ourselves that what we're doing is enough, and what we're all about is good enough, and therefore we feel a different level of inner resources which can overcome the external stressors that we have, right? And then of course, by practicing compassion for others, right? And first of all, compassion for ourselves, also science shows that it helps us to build a level a sense of connection to others as well, which is really interesting. But practicing compassion to others, of course, creates more of that connection on even a deeper level, right? Because we're physically and literally projecting ourselves outward, and really connecting to others. Remember, compassion, the word itself comes from the Latin compassus, which means to suffer with, right? When you're suffering with someone, you're connected to them, right? And so when we practice, compassion for others, what we're doing is we're making that connection. We're getting outside of ourselves, right? And we're no longer dwelling in the repetitive storytelling about the issues that might be causing us the fear, those stressors in our lives that might be, kind of instigating that fear, which causes the stress in our bodies, right? So together, these two things really, do a lot for our stress, in our bodies. And in addition to that, it's also that when we train ourselves in compassion outward as well as compassion towards ourselves, when we train ourselves this way, we build compassion as a sort of trait of our personality, right? A kind of habit or an automatic sort of way that we operate. What happens then is that all the decisions we make, and we make so many more decisions than we realize every single day, like thousands of decisions you're making every single day. And when you're making decisions with, under the sort of under the influence of compassion, right? It just sounds funny to say that, but when we allow compassion to lead our decision making, even the very subconscious decisions that we make, what happens then is that every decision we make is pushing us towards a heartfelt, positive emotion, right? And this is very, very valuable, folks. Very valuable indeed, right? So many times, remember, I've told you before, the way that our brains are wired, right? We're wired for survival, right? That goes back hundreds of thousands of years to the earliest humans, right? We are literally wired for survival, which means that we are always going to tend towards thinking about the negative aspects of our lives, right? The things that cause us danger, the things that pose danger to us, right? That's what we're going to focus on. And it's not a preference, it's not a choice, it's just an automatic thing that we do. And so by, in fact, there's a ratio, right? The psychologist, the wonderful, amazing psychologist, Barbara Friedrichsen, she says that she and her colleagues have come up with a ratio of negativity, right? She calls it the positivity ratio or the negativity ratio. Anyway, the ratio is that we are more likely to feel and to sense and to notice it takes three positive things for every one negative thing, right? So in other words, we're going to be focused on the negative things three times as much as the positive things. So it's only when we have, three positive, heartfelt positive emotions are going to create a tipping point, a balance point for every single negative experience that we have, right? So when we're acting in compassion, and when we're again making compassion part of just the sort of, the programming, the thing that makes us tick, right? When that becomes steeped in compassion, then what we're doing is we're creating that tipping point, right? We're really focusing on those three positive things as opposed to the one negative thing. And once we do that, we get a genuine happiness, a genuine fulfillment, and that is something that can carry us through our lives, and make us just so much more, efficient with the things that we want to do. It makes us better as more effective and more more impactful as parents, and anything else that we're doing, and what it does though is it kind of, it creates for us just a sort of a driving force that is always going towards love, and that's the thing, and that's why it's so important. So, and especially as parents, right, what this does is this makes connection, right? And it's also connection to everybody else in our lives, but specifically and really importantly as parents, right? There's so much research from child psychologists that show that the best thing that we can do, the most impactful thing that we can do for our children, is to build a connection to them, right? To an emotional connection to them, an attunement, right? Which is beneath and deeper than the level of behavior, and really getting in touch with their heart and their emotion, right? And when we can do that, and as we practice compassion, that becomes just kind of automatic. It's like a low-hanging fruit at that point. And so all of these reasons are just, there's enough, I've given you enough reasons to practice compassion every day already, but guess what? I have something else. I'm sure you saw that coming. When we practice compassion for ourselves and for others, okay, we open ourselves up to another really, really impactful way in which we can reduce the stress in our bodies physically, okay, and that is in forgiveness. Okay, now a lot of people, when I mention the word forgiveness, I see the eyes roll. It's almost as bad as saying self-compassion. People feel like, as I said the other day, people feel like, well, when I judge myself and I criticize myself, that's what drives me. That's what keeps me going, right? And people feel the same way about forgiveness. People feel that by not forgiving themselves for things that they've done, by holding themselves accountable and raking themselves over the coals, we kind of somehow, use that as some motivational force, right? And certainly we feel that a lot of people feel that when we forgive others for things that they've done to us, that has an inherent feeling of weakness, right? Or surrender, or acquiescence, or giving license and excuse to somebody for doing something wrong to us, right? And that is a very, very counterintuitive notion for us, right? And we're not likely to do that because, remember, our brains are wired for survival. So oftentimes when we feel like if I forgive this person, I then give them permission to do that thing again, and that of course is going to go against my survival instinct. So it's not even so much a conscious choice that we're making to not forgive someone. It's actually part of our inherent and genetic, the primal drive that we have of survival, right? But here's the thing. There is so much science out there. People have studied forgiveness and the effects of forgiveness on our bodies. And interestingly, it is very, very closely tied with the stress hormones, right? In fact, when you refuse to forgive someone for something that they've done, right? Every time you think of that thing that person did to you, cortisol is released into your bloodstream. Okay, every time, boom, 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 boom. Now, of course, when somebody has done something to us, right, we tend to think about that over and over and over again. Remember that 3-to-1 ratio, right? So when one bad thing happened to us, right, it takes 3 good things to balance that out, which means that we're thinking about this 3 times as much as we're thinking about things like our happiness and our family and our, the good things in our lives, right? And so that's one of those negative things that tends to stick in our minds and repeat itself over and over and over again. And because of the wonderful power of our minds, right, we have this amazing ability to tell stories and to create stories very quickly, very elaborately, and very much geared towards the negative. Remember, our survival instinct, right? And so as we're thinking about these transgressions that people have made towards us, right, or that we've done towards ourselves, what we're doing is we're renewing that sense of, every time we think of that, right? The cortisol is released into our body over and over and over again. And because of the way our minds work, we might think about that thing, 30 or 40 times a day is like on the low end, right? And so what happens is every time you do that 30 or 40 times a day, you're going into that stress response, right? And in the stress response, remember, your blood pressure is rising, your heart rate is increasing, your respiratory system is shortening and shallowing, you're diminishing your lung capacity, your digestive system is shut down, your reproductive system is shut down, your lymphatic system, your immune system, all of them shut down. In fact, when cortisol is present in our body at elevated levels, right, these more studies have shown that your IQ, people taking an IQ test when they have a high level of cortisol rushing through their veins, they score 50% lower than when they take the same test in a state of mind, a place of homeostasis without cortisol present in their body. Right? So literally everything you're doing as you think about that thing that you're unwilling to forgive, over and over and over again, you're doing that to your body. Right? How long does it doesn't take a scientist or a doctor to know that your body can only take so much of that, right? And what is that doing to your decision making? What is it doing to your communication? What is it doing to, as you're interacting with your children or as you're interacting with people with whom you work, right? You're literally not showing up with the full potential that you have for any of them. Right? And of course, as parents, this can be very, very damaging to our relationship, not only to our attuned relationship with our children, but it's also damaging to their psyche, right? And that's where it gets into really tricky stuff, into tricky and dangerous waters, because at that point, we're talking about their development, right? And what you're doing is you're inhibiting their development because they are so keyed in to you. And they need you. They need you to be that rock of predictability, right? But when you're thinking about something that somebody did, like cutting you off on the highway, or bumping in front of you at a line at the grocery store, any hundreds of things that could happen every single day. They don't have to be huge things, even little things. Every time you do that, the stress hormones in your body are going to create that sort of effect that happens, and your kids are going to pick up on it, right? And this pushes them further and further away from you, and also diminishes their ability to develop fully emotionally and even physically on the neurological level. Like the neuroplasticity of their brain is strongly affected by the things that I'm talking about here, right? And so it's not even just on an emotional stress hormone level either. There's actually a doctor in New Orleans who, several years ago, he worked in the burn unit at a hospital in New Orleans. Right now, when people become burned to the point where they have to be hospitalized, right, there's always a level of blame that goes on, right? They're either blaming someone else for an error or a condition that was like illegal or irresponsible on some level that caused this accident, or they're blaming themselves for doing something so horrifically, foolish that hurt themselves so badly. But almost 100% of the time, it always involves that level of blame, right? Either blaming someone else or blaming ourselves, right? And so what this doctor did, he tracked, and now of course when people get burned very badly, when they're in the burn unit in a hospital, a lot of times there's skin grafts involved, right? Like 3rd-degree burns, your skin is literally it needs to be removed, and you need to replace it with skin from another part of your body, right? They take off healthy skin and they graft it onto the place that was burned, right? And so this doctor, he tracked the patients that he had, right? And now here's the thing: when I say, even when I talk about the cortisol levels of forgiveness, right, or how forgiveness affects the cortisol levels, actually forgiving someone is not even the important thing. It's actually just opening yourself up to the potential of forgiveness, and that's where compassion comes in, right? When we sense the, when we develop this habit of wanting the well-being of another to be important to us, right? That's when we open ourselves up to, like, well, maybe I can forgive this person, right? Maybe it's not, maybe I should let it go, right? And that alone will affect the cortisol level. It's not actually forgiving someone. It's not actually like going and calling someone saying, hey, I forgive you for doing what you did. No. It's about just the idea of forgiving someone, just accepting it within your own mind, right? And so what this doctor in New Orleans found, right, and this is staggering, folks, he tried, and then please understand, like, again, it is only the notion of forgiveness, and he was very, very clear about this. He would counsel these patients and say, I'm not asking you to absolve them of culpability, and in fact, if you feel that they did something wrong, I still want you to pursue legal damages. Okay, I still want you to sue them. I still want you to press charges against them. I still want you to seek that sort of justice, that sense of justice, that sense of righteousness, or I hesitate to say retribution because that's punishment, but I encourage you to seek the legal damages that you're deserving, right? But despite that, I want you to just consider the ability to let these people to forgive these people for what they did. Again, doesn't mean you're not going to pursue damages, doesn't mean you're going to become their best friend, doesn't mean you're ever going to tell them that you forgive them, but instead I just want you to consider forgiving them. Okay, so he did this for like a 2 or 3 year period, and so each patient he did this with, right? He found that the patients who were willing to just accept the fact, or just consider the fact that they might forgive these people, like even someday, like it doesn't have to be like, okay, I forgive them now and now my body changes. No, just being open to the notion of forgiveness for these people. What he found was the people who were willing to consider forgiveness for the people that caused them this damage, that their bodies accepted the skin grafts at a rate of 4-1, meaning the people who were unwilling to forgive, they had to have their skin grafts done 4 different times because their body would just reject the skin graft, right? So what I'm saying, folks, is that just by allowing yourself to consider forgiving someone, right, it changes you on a body level, and it literally, your body will accept a physical treatment that is healing. Like, your body will heal at a rate of 4-1. Okay. Now, I mean, so therefore, the bottom line of all this, right, is, and I know this is a bit of a long video here, and I appreciate you watching here, but the bottom line for all of this is the fact that forgiveness is not about someone else, right? It's never about, calling someone up and saying, hey, that thing you did to me back then, I want you to know I forgive you. It's because that's not going to affect them, right? They're living their lives, they're doing whatever they're doing, right, for better or worse. Maybe they're cruel and they're suffering so much that they're doing things that are horrible over and over and over and over again. Your forgiveness is not going to change them, right? They've moved on. They're living their life, right? They're not thinking about you every day as much as you're thinking about them every day, right? And so the idea is that forgiveness is not for another person. Forgiveness is about you. Forgiveness is about making ourselves, like what it is it's saying that we're going to release this burden, right? We're going to put down this burden, and we're not going to carry it any longer, because the burden is not hurting another person, it's hurting us, right? And when we can do this, again, your parenting, your efficiency at work, and every aspect of your life is going to improve as you can do this. And by practicing compassion, that is how forgiveness becomes much, much more intuitive, much, much easier, and much more just readily available to you. You know, you could sum this up in one really great quote that Jack Cornfield once said in a book that I read. He said that forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I know this is a long video. I hope it was valuable for you. And if it was and you would like to let me know, I'd love to hear feedback. And if you have any questions and you want to know about some very specific and simple practices to develop compassion, and also practices that you can do for forgiveness, just hit me up with a comment or send me a direct message or send me an email. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. I'll wish you well.